Welcome back to another tutorial brought to you by Pink's Jewelry along with my friends at allfreebeadedjewelry.com. Today I will be showing you how to make this gorgeous set featuring dyed red jade beads, a pewter leaf clasp, and a pair of earrings to match. Thank you for joining me, and let's get started. So the tools you're going to need for today's project are 2 pairs of chain nose pliers, the smooth kind, not the serrated kind, a pair of round nose pliers, a pair of wire cutter, and a pair of crimping pliers. For your earrings, you'll need 2 ear wires, 2 jump rings, and 2 red dyed jade beads in the shape of a rectangle, and 2 head pins. For the bracelet, you're going to need 14 of those dyed red jade beads, a leaf clasp or any type of clasp that you would like. I'm making this a feature bracelet. That's why I'm having a featured clasp that's a little bit bigger than what you would normally use, because it's really part of the design. So it serves both as a visual as well as function. You also need your beading wire and 2 crimp beads. And if you look on the packaging that your beading wire comes in, there's usually instructions on what size of crimp beads or crimp tube beads to use. So what we'll do first is we're going to take one of our crimp tubes and we're going to thread the wire through it. Then you're going to take one end of your clasp and thread the wire through that. Loop it around and thread your little tail of a wire here and your main wire through that crimp bead. So you're holding on to both your wires here and pulling the crimp bead towards your clasp. You want to leave a little bit of a loop so that the clasp has some give, because if the bead is right next to the clasp and there's no give, then it could snap your wire. So make sure you have a little bit of a loop and you're ready to crimp. So take your crimping pliers, put the crimp bead on the back channel of your crimping pliers, the back channel. It's the crescent shape. And press down. Then you're going to turn so that the smooth side of the crimp bead is facing you, and you're going to put it in the front channel of your crimping pliers. And crimp down. And that will round it out. You want to give it a little tug, make sure that your crimp bead is securely in place, and now you're ready to thread on your beads. Now this particular bracelet, I don't have any accent beads in between because it has such a feature of a clasp, and it just makes that stand out a little bit more. So go ahead and start threading on your jade beads. And the great thing about this is you can make this bracelet as long or as short as you want. You can customize it. You could even make it into a necklace because the toggle itself is such an accent that you could wear that in front. So there's a lot of different ways you can make this customized for you, or if you're making it as a gift. So I'm going to thread on the rest of our beads and we'll be right back. Okay, now that we have all of our beads strung on our bracelet, it's time to go ahead and attach the other end of the clasp. I also wanted to mention, when you are threading your beads on, once you have made that tail of the wire, You want to thread some of that tail through a couple of your beads just to add a little bit of strength on each side. If your beads, the whole of the beads are too small for both wires to go through, you can get a tool that's called a bead reamer and just make the holes in the beads a little bit larger. You don't want to do it too much because it could compromise the structure of the bead, but you use your judgment and just enough so that it would fit over both wires. You don't need a lot, just a little bit. I used about 2 beads worth, and that's plenty. I'll be doing the same on this side. And I'll show you how that's done. Take your other crimp bead and thread your wire through. Take your clasp and thread that through as well. This is just such a pretty accent. Loop your wire around so you have that little tail. Thread that through the crimp bead. And before you crimp, you're going to thread that tail through a couple of your jade beads here. Just 2 should be plenty. If you do it too much, then what'll happen is the flexibility of your bracelet will be thrown off because you'll just have too much wire in certain places. It'll be too thick. So that's why it's important just to have a little bit on each side. So once you've done that, go ahead and pull that tail down. Kind of have to shift everything down a little bit so that you don't have any gaps. Okay, so now that we have the tail of the wire threaded through a couple of beads, we can go ahead and crimp our bead and snip the wire off, or you can snip the wire first and then crimp the bead. It's really your preference. Each one has its advantage. If you snip the wire first, you can ensure that you fill in the gap between these 2 beads. However, if you lose balance of it, then the bracelet could become loose before you crimp the bead. So I'm going to go ahead and snip the wire and then carefully crimp my bead. Okay, so now I've moved that bead down. I'm making sure I have a little bit of wiggle room here, and I'll go ahead and crimp this. So it goes in the back channel first. And then you turn it around, smooth side facing you, and crimp it the other way. There you go. You have a gorgeous new bracelet with a feature piece that you could add more beads and make into a necklace. There's all different ways you can customize it. Let's go ahead and get started on the matching earrings. So you'll thread on your bead to your head pin and cut enough excess wire so that you're left with just under about 1/2 inch. An easy way for me to do that is I just hold it in between my fingers and snip just above them. You may have a different technique, whatever you prefer. Be sure to always hold on to the other end of the wire so it doesn't go flying. Take your round nose pliers and just loop that around till you have a nice loop. Okay, then you're going to take your jump ring and open it up. Thread on your bead through the loop. Thread on your ear wire. Close up your jump ring. And you are done. Repeat for the second earring and you have a beautiful new set. Thank you for joining me for another tutorial brought to you by Pink's Jewelry along with my friends at allfreebeadedjewelry.com. We hope you enjoyed today's jade bracelet and matching earrings. Wish you very happy creating, and thank you again for joining us.